something we noticed while doing research into the people of the valley. There were no graves, there were no pictures or stories of any of the prostitutes that populated the whorehouses in the Lost River Valley. In 1875, the U.S. made it federal law that prostitutes could no longer be bought overseas like China and India. The slave trade had to stop, and that was to include women. The brothels were still maintained at 85,000 women in the U.S. in the 1890s. The average age for a prostitute being induced into a brothel was 13. Most of them were taken from orphanages or found on streets as runaways in the larger cities. The average life expectancy for a prostitute was 5 years. This lifespan was shorter than a mangy, flea-infested, starved dog, and loved less. That meant that most sex slaves never saw the age of 20 in 1890. Brothels in Mackay lost ground. The citizens didn't want any kind of brothel in the area, so they outlawed the brothels, and then the minors and the other patronage. Well, there was judges that came here, lawyers, businessmen, and bankers. It wasn't just the minors, but the brothel was no longer allowed, or brothels no longer allowed within the city limits. So they moved them just outside the city limits, built 6 of them. They were called the Yellow Houses. The story, I've heard different versions, but I'm not sure that the women in the brothels really wanted to be there. Some of them had bars on the windows. Perhaps you doubt whether they were really slaves or not. Then answer me. Why else did they have bars on their windows and weren't allowed to leave? At this time, it was U.S. federal law not to commit abortion or kill unborn children. It was considered murder.
There were basically daycare orphanages, if you will, for them to raise the kids, because they didn't abort the fetus. They had the kids when they got pregnant, and so they had to do something with the kids, and they did take care of the kids and raise the kids.
Now check this. The sex slaves would not kill their unborn babies. In fact, they had daycare centers for their children born from these men using them. One of the prominent wealthy businessmen in the valley came testing out his new brothel girls, and he began arguing and fighting with one of them. The fight led to the businessman beating the brothel girl over the head with a bottle of wine. Her skull was smashed in the forehead, and it took her 3 days to die from the wound. The local self-made dentist, veterinarian, brothel doctor, and future mayor of Mackay performed weekly checks of the prostitutes in the brothels to see if they were infected with the disease. When the girl died, he removed the top part of her skull, taking the evidence from off her head. Someone charged the wealthy businessman with murder, and during the trial, the prosecuting attorney asked if she could have died from pneumonia. And the brothel doctor said, "She most definitely did. She most definitely did." The judge then asked the same question of the doctor, and the brothel doctor responded in the same way. The doctor kept the girl's skull on his desk for years after that, as a reminder to the wealthy lie-or-die gang businessmen of the area of what they owed him for becoming an accomplice in her murder.